And we're live. I think we're live. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Story Time with Rosemary. Uh, you know, we decided that it would be a good idea to have story time from time to time because people do love to hear stories. People do love to hear my stories, but they love to hear other people's stories through me when I've been involved with so many different things over the years, so many different amazing, sometimes spooky stories, sometimes just really weird, strange stories, sometimes stories that sort of just make you say, wow, did that really happen? And those stories that we say wow to, trust me, I'm one of those who's saying wow. Even though some of our stories are just so unexpected as they're happening to me, and as I'm going through these things and experiencing all of these things, so often I in my work I have that wow factor, and I'm thinking to myself, even as I'm going through the experience, I'm thinking to myself, wow, is that really happening? Did that really happen? So very often I tell stories which have to do with other people. I tell healing stories, I tell stories of things that go bump in the night, I tell sort of ghostly, weird, wonderful, sort of spooky stories. Today I thought I'd tell you a puppy dog tale. So we're going to have a little puppy love today. And this is a story that happened to me, and it's also a story about my own puppy, Nino, who I had for 14 years, and he was the absolute love of my life. This was, of course, until my grandson came along. My daughter's going to be so upset. She's going to say, I thought I was the love of your life. But, so let me tell you this story. So I had a puppy whose name was Rosie. And Rosie was a rescue dog, and she took a lot of dealing with, and she was not an easy dog. And my wonderful dog trainer, Fred Bradley, who is an amazing dog trainer, he advised me that I should not have another dog because Rosie, the dog, would probably not get on with anyone else. She was very territorial. She was aggressive. The only person she wasn't aggressive really with was me. But even I trusted Fred. Today I would absolutely trust Fred. But this was one of those times when I just had that feeling. Now, all of you, don't you? When you just have that feeling, there's just a feeling going on, right? And very often when we follow our feelings, that's our instincts, our sixth sense, our grandmother or our mother or father or whoever tapping us on the shoulder. Those feelings are those people in the spirit world who are saying to us, this is right. This is right. They're trying to guide us and steer us. So I had this feeling every time I looked at Rosie that she was really lonely and that she needed a puppy. So against everybody's advice, I decided I just would love a puppy. So I decided that I wanted a chocolate Labrador. Now my dog trainer Fred said, you don't want one of those, don't have one of those, they're crazy, they're loopy, so on and so forth. And anyway, I'd made up my mind and that was what I was going to have. So I looked and I scoured everywhere. I lived in Vermont at the time. But I went beyond New York State. I went, into Massachusetts. I went to even as far as Maine. I was willing to travel if I could just find the right puppy, and I knew that I would be guided. Anyway, finally, on Christmas Eve in the morning, we got a phone call. There was a man who had a Labrador, and the Labrador had, I think it was 4 or 5 puppies. However, all of his puppies were taken, but there was one puppy left, same litter, but owned by a different guy who lived in Massachusetts or somewhere down there anyway. And he said, you can come and look at my dog, because he was fairly close to where we lived. You can come and look at mine, you can look at the puppies, And then, you know, you can sort of then decide whether you think that this other puppy would be right for you. So off we go. Now, I love dogs. I'm a dog lover, but I don't necessarily like other people's dogs. That I like my dogs. I'm not saying I don't like other people's dogs. I'm saying I don't necessarily like all dogs. But I went to this house and there was this enormous, beautiful Labrador, and who doesn't like puppies? And they were cute as buttons, but not for me. It didn't feel right, not for me. So I said to the guy, I said, well, and it meant us driving all the way down to the Massachusetts Turnpike, which is a long way from Vermont. And by this time it was snowing, it was cold, it was getting dark, and so on and so forth. And I said, by this time, I said, no, you know, thank you, but no, thank you. And the guy said, but he's on his way. We tried calling, we called the guy's house. His wife said, I'm sorry, but he's been gone at least a half an hour. So anyway, we ended up having to go all the way to the Massachusetts Turnpike. I was with my boyfriend at the time, and I was also with my daughter who was sitting in the back seat, and I did nothing. I own up. I did nothing but moan and groan and complain the whole way. I did not want these puppies. I did not want anything to do with them. Not for me, absolutely not right for me. No. And so by this time, it's pitch black. We were going to a sort of a family party, a friend's family party. So the idea was we were going to pick the puppy up first, although now I decided I didn't want it. And then we were going on to the party, and the snow was now coming down. You know how when you'd have to drive sort of really, really slowly, because although it's not heavy snow, it's not necessarily settling, but it's thick, and the windscreen wipers are going. Anyway, we eventually, after a couple of hours of driving in this awful weather, we get to the Massachusetts Turnpike. I'd never been to the Massachusetts Turnpike before. I didn't even know what the Massachusetts Turnpike was. It turns out it's just one big giant car park, massive place. And we had arranged to meet this guy. He said, I've got a dark blue truck, and and I'd set myself up. I'm going to say to him, thank you very much, I'm so sorry you had to travel all this way, but no thanks, I don't want the puppy. I didn't want a puppy from this particular litter. Didn't do a thing for me. So my boyfriend and my daughter had decided that I could do that and they'd stay in the car. They were having nothing to do with the fact that this poor guy had to drive an hour from wherever he came to the Massachusetts Turnpike, and I was just going to say, sorry, but I don't want the puppy. But I think when you're buying a puppy, you have to be very circumspect, and it has to be something that you feel and something that is right for you, and you have to feel right about it, and you have to check their eyes, and you've got to check your teeth, and you've got to check the pedigree, and you've got to check all these things, and you've got to be, because at the end of the day, if you end up with a puppy that you don't feel right with, then that's not right, is it? So here we are, we pull into the Massachusetts Turnpike, which is this enormous car park. We still can't see anything because the snow is coming down and the wipers are going like this and so on and so forth. And we see where there are sort of like a spattering. Most of the car park is empty. Who would be out on the road on Christmas Eve in this weather at this time of the night? So there's a sort of a smattering of cars and things around, but you can't really see them. I said to my boyfriend, look, just let's pull in here, and then we're just going to have to get out, get our coats on, and walk around and see if we can see this guy. So he pulled in to a parking spot, and we're looking out, cannot even see that there's a car park sort of facing us, and sort of a few cars parked here and there, but you couldn't see a thing, you couldn't see anything. And so we're debating what to do, and it's my dog, and I'm the one who's got to tell the guy, sorry, but we don't want the puppy. So my boyfriend and my daughter having nothing to do with any of this, so they decide it's up to me to get out and take a look and see if I can find this blue truck. But as I'm sitting there and I'm wondering what to do, my attention is drawn to the car that we've parked facing. And I can't see it. I can't see whether it's a car, a truck, or whatever it is. You can't see through the windscreen. Couldn't see through his windscreen. But then I had, that feeling that you have, that sixth sense thing that comes along. I just had this feeling, and I can only describe it as if somebody were pulling me, or something was pulling me into this thing, this car, this vehicle in front of me that I couldn't even see. And at some point, I just knew my puppy's in there. And I remember thinking quite clearly, my puppy's in there. So I said this to my boyfriend and my daughter, who told me to not be ridiculous because I couldn't even see what the vehicle was. And I had this, I can only describe it as if somebody were pulling me or pushing and pulling me. Whatever is in that vehicle belongs to me. And there was this tremendous pull. The next thing, I leap out of the car. My daughter and my boyfriend, where are you going? What are you doing? And I just said to them, my puppy's in there. And got out of the car and went around. Still couldn't see what kind of a vehicle it was. It did turn out to be a dark blue truck, but still. And got out of the car, went around to the passenger door and opened the door. And the guy sitting at the steering wheel is looking at me as if I've gone a little bit crazy. And I look at him and I say, and there's no sign of the puppy. And I look at him and I say, I think you've got my puppy in here, right? And he looks at me and he smiles, and then we both, I noticed that there's a cardboard box sitting on the seat. And again, it's as if there's this magnetic pull, and I reach in and I just take out this little furry thing. Do not ever do this, ever, any of you. This is not the way to buy a puppy. Except I just knew that he was mine. I had spent 2 hours saying, I'm just going to have to tell him I don't want the puppy. Thank you for coming. I don't want this. No, I don't like the litter. I certainly don't like the sire. No, nothing about this whole litter of puppies is for me. And yet, this little furry thing in this cardboard box was just drawing me to him. So I scooped him out and I put him to my neck here. And he snuggled right into my coat and he buried his nose in my neck, and that was it. I couldn't see him, it was far too dark. I couldn't see what his eyes were like, I couldn't see anything about him. Never buy a puppy like that. It's the worst thing you could possibly do. So the guy comes out, he stands with me and I'm talking to him and I'm asking him, well, what's his diet and so on and so forth. And he's telling me, this is what he eats and so on. And we were standing there for a good 5 minutes before my daughter suddenly I thought she was just going to say we don't want it and we could be on our way. Remember, she spent 2 hours listening to me moaning and complaining about having to drive there in the first place. And that was it. She scrabbled out of the car and she looked at me, and my boyfriend got out and he looked at me and they looked at each other and they shrugged and they looked at me again and said, so what? So what? So I said, oh, well, he's mine. I'm taking him. He's mine. And that's the end of that. And so we paid the guy the money and we drove off to our party. And the puppy sat on Samantha's knee in the back seat because she just wanted to hold him and cuddle him. And at this point, we literally couldn't see what he looked like. We had no clue what he looked like. We took him out of the car, he took to the party, he peed in the garden, and it was the weirdest thing. This party was very lively, very busy, very lively, very loud. There were two other rambunctious dogs there playing with each other, and of all the places to take a puppy who has no idea where he is, what he's doing, it was completely the wrong thing to do. Never do that, ever. I'm advising you, never do that. This puppy, I swear, and he was 6 or 7 weeks old, could fit into the palm of my hand, and he literally sat by my feet the entire time, just watching everything going on, not a bit disturbed, extremely mellow, very easy. And I didn't want anyone to fuss or cuddle him too much, because you don't do that with puppies either. So I was obeying some of the rules, but only when it suited me. And that was that. At some time, sort of like 2 or 3 in the morning, we drove back. We arrived back in Vermont, and now we had to see about our Rosie, our Brittany, who was fierce, and she hated other dogs, and she would actually ravage other dogs if they even went out. But she sounds awful. She was a sweetheart. She had been very badly treated, so there's really good reason for why she behaved that way. And so, listening to Fred's warning, do not get her a playmate or another dog, because she will not take to it. So we're standing there, my boyfriend, my daughter, and myself, at 3 in the morning, and I put the puppy on the floor, and we stood back and held our breath, and Rosie first of all walked round one way, sniffing, walked the other way, sniffing, sort of sniffing and pushing with her nose and so on. And this little puppy just lay on its back, total submission, lay on its back, paws in the air. And the next thing, Rosie started licking and sniffling and nudging, and the puppy started nudging, and it was as if we'd given Rosie her own baby. They were like this. They were inseparable. The only time that Nino, my new puppy, the only time that he was not with Rosie was when he was with me, and he would stick to me like glue. If you couldn't find me, look for the dog. If you couldn't find the dog, look for me. And that's how Nino and I came to be. Everybody kept bombarding me with names. It took me a few weeks before I would actually give him a name. And because I couldn't think of a name, I kept calling him little boy. Come on, little boy. Come on, little boy. And then, of course, all of a sudden it dawned on me, yes, he is my little boy. Actually, he's my Nino. And we all know that the Nino is Spanish for little boy. So he was my Nino. I had him for 14 years, and he was my absolute treasure. Rosie turned from this really unhappy, aggressive puppy to, so mellow, so calm, so easy. She was still extremely protective, but whereas before, if anyone came through the door, she would growl and her hackles would go up, and you'd have to really watch what she was doing. Because when people walked through the door, Nino would go up and he'd wag his tail and everybody would give him his attention. Within a couple of months, Rosie was doing exactly the same thing. She realised that it was okay, and also, she was very protective of Nino. She was like Nino's mum. So it's amazing. There's certain things that are meant to be. I was so convinced I was not going to have a puppy from this litter. And never buy a dog that you can't see. Never buy a dog in these circumstances. You always need to check in the mouth. You always need to check the eyes, because some dogs have what they call red eye, and you always have to just check them out and make sure that you like them. But I cannot describe properly and thoroughly to any of you, as I was sitting in the car looking through the windscreen, snow was coming down. It was pitch black. There were no lights. If any of you have been to the Massachusetts Turnpike, there are no lights on there. It's pitch black. And, obviously there was snow on the windscreen of the other car. How could I possibly have seen in? I didn't. And how could I have possibly known from I'm absolutely not going to have, and when I make up my mind about something, I'm not a bit of a wuss. I'm not going to say, oh, I'll have him just because you've driven an hour or so. I'm not going to do that. So how can we explain that feeling that sometimes we just know? Now, I don't know if you've got any comments. We're going to take a couple of comments. Then I'm going to tell you another puppy tale about my Cachorro, and you won't believe this one. You might believe the one I've just told you, but you will not believe this one. It's not as long a story, but I'm going to tell it just the same, because that also is a bit spooky and a bit fascinating. Do we have any comments, Michelle? I should say, I have said good morning, Michelle. I'm so sorry. Michelle's here checking out comments and so on and so forth. Got any comments, Michelle?
Good morning. We have a few. Mary Lou's on this morning. Karen's on this morning. She said her and her mom were watching. Maggie is on this morning. She said that she thinks that they sometimes pick you. You don't get to pick them.
Oh, I don't think it's sometimes. I think it's always. But I agree with you, Maggie.
And that's all of our real comments for right now.
All right, so here is one more spooky story, not as long, and then this will end my story time. But for all of you out there with pets, for all of you who have lost pets, let me just say, before I start on my next story, I had my darling Nino, and he grew big. He was big. He was a really big, beautiful dog, skinny but very tall, and he would sit on my knee every single morning. I mean, he would just sit on my knee and bury me under the chair. It was quite funny, but that's where he liked to be. He was mine until he was 14 years old, and unfortunately, at the very last, and it only lasted him a few weeks, he suddenly started bleeding, and he was diagnosed with cancer. I was actually away in Italy at the time, and I came home. My friends Marianne and Pam were taking care of them, and they had 2 or 3 days before I arrived home, they had taken him to the vet, and he was diagnosed, and he just suddenly went downhill, and he could not get up. They had to carry him on his blanket out into the gardens where he could, manage to stagger and do his what he needed to do. He never ever messed in the house, even when he was a tiny puppy. He just wouldn't do that. Just didn't do that. But they couldn't get him up, and he was failing fast, and they were worried that he was going to go before I got home. And I got home, and it was around Christmas time, and I got to Marianne and Pam's house, and the moment he heard my voice, I can remember he was lying on a blanket. I went to him, put his head on my lap, and he started to try to get up. And for the next week, every day I'd take him out into the garden for a couple of turns. Sorry, my daughter is calling. Anyway, so every day I would take him around, and then we managed to somehow he managed to last until New Year's Day, and then I decided, as we all have to do, because we're responsible, aren't we, for our puppies, and on that day I took him to the vet and he passed away very nicely, very peacefully. But for all of you out there who've had the same situation or have dogs and you're worried about this, please don't, because I've got so many puppy tales to tell you, you would be amazed. But I've seen him, I know he's safe, I know he's well, and even as I'm saying this, I'm smiling because I actually can see him sort of out of the corner of my eye here. So I know he's well, I know he's safe, and I know that, one down, we're all of us going to be together again. Quick story, second story, as I said to you. This is about my Cachorro, who is, as we speak, he's always going to be in the corner there. He's sound asleep. He'll be 14 years old this July. So he's getting on a bit, so he sleeps a lot. But, okay, so I'd gone somewhere on my travels, and my fabulous friend Fred Bradley had taken in Rosie and also Nino. And so I came home to pick them up. And the first thing he said to me as I got out of the car, he said, "I've got you a puppy." And I laughed. It was a big joke, and I laughed. I said, "No, thanks, but no thanks. I've got two already. Don't want another one." No. He said, "No, you Rosemary, you don't understand. I'm serious. I've got you a puppy." And I said, so more seriously, "Fred, you don't understand. I don't want another dog. It's very sweet of you. Thank you, but no thank you." So he said, no, you have to take this puppy. This is your puppy. So he took me to see this litter of 4 puppies. And as I've said to you, I love dogs, but I don't get overwhelmed by, oh, how cute, and I've got to have one sort of thing. So I look at the puppies and they don't do really anything for me. Completely different story, you see, to Nino. Nothing. I feel nothing. They're very cute. They're very lovely. And Fred reached into the pen and he pulled out this one puppy and he said, this is yours. And I said, "Thanks, but very cute, very lovely. I really appreciate it. Thanks, but no thanks." So we went into the house and he made us a cup of tea, and then he said to me, I have to tell you this story. And Fred is a trainer and he has a litter of puppies, and he watches them every day. He goes in 2 or 3 times a day just to sit in a corner quietly, and he watches them. He watches how they interact with each other. He watches how they interact with their mother, so on and so forth. He knows about dogs. So he tells me that this one day he's sitting with this litter of 4 puppies, and three puppies are with their mother and they're all snuggled together, and there is one puppy over by himself, lying by himself, and every time he goes in there to see this litter, this one puppy is always over in the corner by himself. So he's sitting there and he's looking at them and he's watching them interact, and all of a sudden he hears a voice. Now, trust me, Fred is not psychic. He does not claim to be psychic, but he has a knowing sense with his animals, but he's not psychic. So anyway, so he's sitting there this day and he hears a voice, and the voice says, and he's looking at this one puppy sort of on its own, wondering why there's no interaction and so on, and he looks at this puppy and he hears this voice say, "That's Rosemary's." And he sort of shakes his head, he looks around and there's nobody there, and he sort of shrugs it off and thinks, it's his imagination or whatever it is. And the next time he goes and he hears the voice again, louder, clearer, "That's Rosemary's puppy." And these puppies, you have to understand, they are not inexpensive. This is how he makes his living. So anyway, he sort of then he shrugs it off. He ignores it completely, and a couple of times later after that, he goes in and he's watching and interacting, watches how the puppies are interacting, and he hears the voice again for the 3rd time. Now, those of you who know me very well absolutely know you've got to listen to the 3-time rule. You pay attention to the 3-time rule. And so for the 3rd time, and this time, instead of it being that sort of soft, this is Rosemary's puppy, and then more firmly, he hears it shouted in his ear, that is Rosemary's puppy. So he's horrendous. He doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know why he's giving me this truly expensive puppy that he could get a lot of money for. He has no clue why he's doing it, but he knows absolutely that that is my puppy. So he tells me this story. So I say to him, Fred, I love you. I love you very much. I really don't want another puppy. So I drive home with my Nino and my Rosie, and I drive all the way to Vermont, which is a good hour and a half drive away. And all the time I'm thinking of what Fred has told me, and all the time it's going around in my head, and I'm thinking, but no, thank you. I'm saying to those in spirit world, and to Grey Eagle, he's laughing as I'm saying this, thanks, but hey, no, I really don't want another puppy. Two dogs are enough for me. No, but thank you, but no, thank you. But as I was driving off, Fred had said to me, we'll keep him for you, don't worry, just let me know when you're going to come and collect him. And he's laughing, I'm laughing and saying, no. So we go home, and I've got this going around in my head, and then I start to think, well, a lot of hunting people go to Fred for dogs because he trains hunters. That's what he does. He trains bird dogs. He's a marvelous trainer. Anyway, so I start to think, what if the puppy gets a guy, an owner who's mean to him? What if nobody loves him? What if he's not cared for? What if he's one of those dogs that they take them out for hunting, but then they don't see them again for a few months, and then they take them out for hunting again? What if he's one of those dogs? And being around, if you've ever been around the hunting world, you know that there are people who use hunting dogs just for the season, then they put them in kennels, then they bring them out again the next season, so on and so forth. So in my mind, I start to think, what if nobody's going to love him? What if he's going to be mistreated? And on it goes in my head, this little worm in my head, until the next morning. Early in the morning, I can't take it any longer, and I call Fred and I said, are you in this morning? And he starts to laugh. He's laughing so hard. He said, were you thinking of coming down then? And I said, perfectly well, I'm coming for my dog. And that was that. And I ended up going back, picking up Cachorro, and he was so tiny. He was actually only just not quite 6 weeks old, and he was this tiny little ball of fluff. But Fred would not normally allow puppies to leave their mothers at that age, but he knew me really well, so he knew that I would be able to manage with this. And I think he just thought, once she's accepted, I'm going to strike while the iron's hot. I'm going to give her this puppy. So he was this little ball of fluff, but he looked just like a lion cub. He looked like this little tiny wild animal, and hence the name Cachorro. Cachorro, Spanish for little wild cub or wild thing. And the only time I'd ever heard anyone called that name before was this big giant of a man who was working in a stables, and he was this massive big giant of a Spaniard, and everybody would call him, hey, Cachorro, because he was so big. It was a kind of a joke. But when I looked at this little thing, and he looked so much like a lion cub, I thought, this is my Cachorro. So that's how he was named, and he was meant for me whether I wanted him or not. He and Nino were like completely inseparable. Nino couldn't stand Cachorro. Every time Cachorro went near him, like this, not really vicious, but letting the puppy know, stay away from me. I'm the baby in this house. I'm the puppy in this house. And Cachorro would sort of scoot away, and then he'd slowly wriggle on his belly, get closer and closer, and then Nino would growl and shove him away and get closer and closer again, until I think Nino just gave up, and then they became the best of friends. And so that there are my doggy tales. Dogs that two dogs actually I didn't want, but the spirit world knew me better than I knew myself, and for one reason or another, there they were, there they are. Cachorro is 14 in July. I know he's not got too much longer. I keep saying this. He's my very last one. I shall not have another. Nino for 14 years. Oh, we were the best friends, and I don't want to get maudlin or upset, because even though we have to make the hard decisions while they are with us, don't they bring us so much joy, and don't they bring us so much pleasure? And for me, absolutely knowing that these puppies were meant to be in my life, they were absolutely meant for me, given to me as a gift, and I believe a gift from the spirit world, because each in their own way came at a time in my life when I really needed healing. Cachorro especially, he was the one who helped me over a massive, massive hurdle, and he is actually a healer dog. He has healing qualities, and I'll tell you that story another time. Comments, questions, anything going on, Michelle? Story time is almost over, folks.
Maggie has made a couple. Let's see. Wendy is on. She says, good morning.
Morning.
Cynthia is on. She says, send light to Italy, into the world. I'm with you.
As we do.
Nadia says, I was living in Italy when you were on the Maurizio Costanzo show.
Costanzo, yeah. Maurizio Costanzo show. I was on the Maurizio Costanzo show many, many times. So hi.
That she was always fascinated by your beautiful gift and even bought your books. She's now living in Canada, and she's so happy to see you on Facebook.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you.
Maggie said, my border collie Max passed away last year of cancer, and my daughter's golden Riley passed 2 years ago.
Oh.
In November of 19, she was outside and rescued a German Shepherd from the roadway after several cars nearly missed her. No tags, horribly skinny and extremely shy. We took her in, and soon she became part of the family. We find she's a mix between the Max and Riley that we lost.
How lovely. Thank you for that story. Thank you. As you know, I mean, we are talking doggy tales, but I know there are people out there who are cat lovers, and I just wrote a story for my grandson about 2 kittens. I think that I was thinking about this, and maybe thinking about doing it on Instagram or something like that. I think that I should do a story time for kids. In these times when parents have no clue, the kids are driving them crazy, what do I do with them? And I thought, if we set up a story time just for children with my stories, because you don't know this about me, do you? But I do write children's stories, and they are a lot of fun. I read a couple to Michelle yesterday. Be honest, Michelle. You can be brutally honest.
No, they were really good, and my kids enjoyed them a lot. And I was surprised because, my kids are older, and they sat through it. They wanted the second one. They wanted to hear more.
Yeah. So I thought, maybe in these times when you're all tied up and you don't quite know what to do with your kids, or if you're an adult and like me, you just love children's stories, because I'll read children's stories. I'll even watch children's movies sometimes. But, I thought maybe we'll have a story corner for kids. So we're going to be thinking about that very hard. And I shall let you know. So I think, any more comments? I can see people sort of I can see things popping up. Can't actually see what anybody's writing, but I can see people are making comments or whatever. How are we doing, Michelle?
Maggie said that her daughter thinks that she saw Max behind her.
Yeah.
The dog that had passed.
Yeah.
Carl said, first time after reading 2 books. I don't know what that means.
We're not quite sure what you mean, but that's
And
okay. We're just glad you're here and listening.
Maggie said, "Why did I see a thought bubble appear over Rosemary that said, of course, when you said Maggie had a few comments?"
Oh, I love you, Maggie.
Randy said, "I read your books and saw you in Plainville, New York,
Oh,
live many years ago."
gosh.
And she said that you can talk to teens too.
Oh, yes, absolutely, yeah. Oh, my thing, my thing is kids. And if you're 58 and you're a kid, you're my thing. If you're 79 and you're a kid, you're my thing. If you're 2 or 3, you're definitely my thing. Teenagers are my thing. We actually had a birthday party and Michelle brought her two daughters, and so 2 or 3 of them were teenagers and some a little bit younger, and Michelle and her husband went. I said, go, they'll be fine with me. And when she came back, I had them all sitting around in a circle outside, and we were having a discussion which the kids really got into. I'm not bad with kids. I know exactly what to do with them, how to do it with them, and I'm very firm as well, and people usually pay attention when I say, hey, don't do that, don't misbehave. Or I'll often say to kids, because sometimes when one kid is telling a story, the other kids are in their own, they're not listening. So I make sure that if one person is talking, all the kids are paying attention, give the respect of listening to what somebody has to say. So I'm very stern, but I think very fair. And I love kids. So whether you're a kid of whatever it is, of whatever age you are, maybe we'll have a story time. In these times when, I know parents are perhaps tearing your hair out, I know that Reese will sit very still and very quiet as I'm telling him my stories, and he loves them. And then we love to have conversations afterwards. So maybe we'll have a story time when maybe the kids can interact and kids can go in the chat room and say whatever it is that they want to say. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see what we can do about that. In the meantime, is that it, Michelle? We are done with story time. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening. Please stay safe in these times. One of the reasons I decided to tell my puppy tales today was because I just want to bring people out of the despair and all the worries and the concerns, and just lighten the load. God has a plan. I know it seems at the moment like it's a horrible plan, but he has a plan for our learning and for our growth. And please try and remember that. Sometimes, and I think the times that we're in at the moment, sometimes we simply just have to say, let go and let God. And so with that in mind, please have a very, very blessed rest of the day. If you want to know more about us, you can email me, rosemary@rosemaryantaltea.com. If you want to know what we're up to, or what other things that we're about, please again email me, rosemary@rosemaryantaltea.com. If you can, put in the subject line of your email what it is that you want to talk to me about, because it does help Michelle to sort things out much easier, put things into folders, and we can usually process emails faster if you do that. Excuse me. If you want to be on the mailing list, again, you have to request. We will not automatically put you on the mailing list just because you send us an email. So please, if you want to request to be put on the mailing list, where we send out about 5 emails a month, and we can let you know what's going on, what we're doing next, what we're up to. This story time will definitely, Michelle will upload it to YouTube at some point.
It'll be on YouTube today.
Oh, okay, so it's going to be on YouTube today. So, if you want to share it with your kids or your grandkids, how Rosemary had 2 puppies foisted on her, and thanks God for that. And in the strangest of ways, things come to us. If we look really hard, things always come to us at the right time for the right reasons. I do want to send out a shout out to Michelle's husband, who knocked himself unconscious yesterday and
2 days ago.
2 days ago, and we hope he's on the mend. For all of you out there, again, stay safe, keep washing your hands. Do not allow the infection of fear to get to you. Think of my puppies. Think of what the spirit world went to. Can you imagine the planning that went into my actually ending up driving to Massachusetts, and there's a guy ending up driving to the Massachusetts Turnpike? Can you think of all the planning that went on in the spirit world just so that I could have my Nina? Amazing, right? We have no clue. But it is wonderful. I shall see you all again, if not before, definitely Wednesday. Yes, definitely on Wednesday afternoon with our Healing Hands Around the World. On Thursday we shall be doing our The Spirit World Sees All live show, where you can chat, ask questions, do whatever it is you want to do. And also again on Thursday at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, we shall be doing our Everything is Attitude show with Al Pisano. We're possibly going to have a guest on. We shall let you know. We shall be sending out emails. In the meantime, have a very, very blessed rest of the day and have a wonderful weekend, everyone. Now I've got to figure out how to end this. I think it's that little thing down there. I'm not sure.